In 1962, a family in rural Wisconsin would climb into the car on a Saturday night, drive 20 minutes past the last streetlight, and pull into a gravel lot beside a frozen lake. Inside, a relish tray hit the table before anyone had ordered a thing. Number 14 on this list was once so popular that supper clubs went through it by the barrel. Number 3 was not even a real dish, yet no meal in America started without it. And number 1 fed more Saturday nights across this country than any restaurant chain ever has. These 25 dishes built a way of eating that casual chains erased in a single generation. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 long-lost supper club meals America couldn't stop ordering. Number 25, garlic cheese toast. Before the meal, before the salad, before anything, a basket landed on your table steaming under a cloth napkin. Thick slices of soft white bread, brushed with butter, smothered in garlic and a blanket of melted cheese, broiled until the edges went brown and crackling. It cost the supper club almost nothing to make. A loaf of bread, a pound of butter, a brick of cheese. But it told you everything about where you were. This was a place that fed you before you spent a dime. Families in Wisconsin and Minnesota remember reaching across the table for that last piece, fingers slick with garlic butter. While the grown-ups ordered another round, the casual chains kept the breadstick and the biscuit, but they put a price on abundance. The supper club never did. That basket was a promise. You were going to leave full. Number 24, rumaki. This was the appetizer that made a Tuesday feel like a celebration. A chunk of chicken liver and a slice of water chestnut wrapped tight in a strip of bacon, brushed with soy and brown sugar, then broiled until the bacon crisped and the glaze turned sticky and dark. It came to the table on a little plate with toothpicks, 3 or 4 pieces, hot enough to burn your fingers. The liver inside stayed soft and rich. The water chestnut snapped clean, and the bacon held the whole thing together with salt and smoke. Rumaki rode the wave of the post-war fascination with the South Pacific, the tiki bars and the luau parties, but it was the supper clubs of the Midwest that kept it alive on the appetizer menu for 30 years. A pound of chicken livers cost about $1 in 1958. The supper club turned that quarter into something that felt expensive. Today it has vanished almost completely. Too strange for a generation raised on mozzarella sticks. Number 23, shrimp cocktail. In the middle of the continent, 1,000 miles from any ocean, the shrimp cocktail was a small miracle. 5 or 6 chilled shrimp hooked over the rim of a footed glass, packed in crushed ice. A little cup of red cocktail sauce in the center, sharp with horseradish and lemon. For a farm family in Iowa or a mill worker in northern Wisconsin, ordering shrimp meant something. It meant the freezer trucks had made it, that the world was bigger than the county line, that tonight you were eating like the people in the magazines. The shrimp came frozen, of course, boiled in the back and chilled fast, but nobody cared. That first cold bite, dunked in sauce that cleared your sinuses, was the taste of arriving somewhere. A shrimp cocktail ran about 90 cents in the early 60s, more than the whole rest of some people's dinner, and it was ordered without apology. Number 22, French onion soup. It arrived in a heavy brown crock that was too hot to touch. The cheese bubbled up over the rim and browned in long, stringy ribbons down the side. Underneath that cap of broiled Gruyere was a raft of soggy bread, and under that, a deep brown broth of onions, cooked down for hours until they turned sweet and silky and almost dissolved. You had to break through the cheese with the edge of your spoon, and it stretched and pulled in long strands that you wound around like spaghetti. The first spoonful scalded your tongue every single time, and you went back for another anyway. A supper club made its onion soup from beef bones and bins of yellow onions that cost pennies a pound, and they caramelized for the better part of an afternoon. It was peasant food, dressed up in a tuxedo. The casual chains tried to sell it from a bag, thin and salty, and it was never the same. The patience left with the supper clubs. Number 21. The wedge salad with blue cheese. A quarter of an iceberg lettuce head, cut straight from the core, sat on a chilled plate like a green pyramid. Over it went a ladle of thick blue cheese dressing, so heavy it pooled at the base, dotted with chunks of real Roquefort and a scatter of bacon and chopped tomato. There was no artistry to it. There was barely any knife work. But the cold crunch of that iceberg against the cool, funky, tangy dressing was its own kind of perfect. The blue cheese was the point. A good supper club made its own dressing in a 5-gallon bucket, crumbling block after block of blue cheese into buttermilk and mayonnaise until it was almost too strong, and the regulars asked for extra on the side. Today, the wedge survives on a few steakhouse menus, but the homemade dressing, that bucket of funk and cream, mostly died with the men and women who used to make it by hand. Number 20. Broasted chicken. Here is a piece of American history most people have never heard. In 1954, a company in Beloit, Wisconsin, invented a machine that pressure-fried chicken, and they called the result broasted. It was not fried in the open. It was sealed in a pressure cooker full of hot oil, which cooked the bird fast and locked the juices inside, so the skin came out shatteringly crisp, while the meat stayed almost wet with juice. Supper clubs across the Midwest bolted these machines into their kitchens and built half their menus around them. For families who could not afford the prime rib, broasted chicken was the great equalizer. Half a chicken, golden and steaming, with a baked potato and that relish tray, all for under $2 in 1965. Children fought over the wings. The skin crackled. The meat pulled clean off the bone. You still find broasted chicken at the few supper clubs and corner taverns that kept their machines. But most of America has forgotten that the best fried chicken it ever ate was never technically fried at all. Number 19. Liver and onions. Before liver became the dish that people made jokes about, it was a supper club staple that the regulars ordered with real hunger. Thin slices of calf's liver, dredged in flour and seared fast in butter. Just 2 minutes aside so it stayed pink and tender in the middle. Never the gray rubber that gave it a bad name. Over the top went a mountain of onions cooked low and slow until they collapsed into sweet brown ribbons, and the whole thing sat in a pool of pan drippings. It was rich, it was mineral, it was deeply savory in a way that nothing on a modern menu is. Liver cost almost nothing, maybe 20 cents a pound, because butchers had more of it than they could sell, and the supper club turned that cheap cut into something a working man would drive across the county for. A generation grew up hating liver because their mothers overcooked it at home. The supper club cooks knew better. They knew the secret was speed. Here is where things get interesting. The supper club was never really about the food, not entirely. It was about the drive. You did not stumble into a supper club from the sidewalk. You got in the car, you left town, and you wound your way out to a low building beside a lake or a highway, where the parking lot was gravel and the sign was lit in neon. Inside, the lights were dim. The booths were deep, and the first thing that happened was a brandy old-fashioned, because Wisconsin drinks more brandy than any state in the Union and has since the 1893 World's Fair. You sat in the bar for an hour before they even called your table. The casual chains turned eating out into a transaction. The supper club turned it into an evening. Number 18. Frog legs. This is the one that makes people squirm, and it was once a Friday night delicacy across the Midwest. Pairs of frog legs, dredged in seasoned flour and fried golden, served on a platter with lemon wedges and a dish of melted butter. The meat was pale and delicate, somewhere between chicken and fish, and you ate it with your fingers, working the small bones the way you would a chicken wing. Supper clubs near rivers and marshes bought frog legs by the case from local trappers, and in towns along the Mississippi and the Wisconsin River, a frog leg dinner was a point of regional pride. They were cheap because the supply was local, and the labor was somebody's teenage son out with a flashlight and a gig. For $1.25 you got a heaping plate. Frog legs have nearly disappeared from American menus, pushed off by squeamishness and supply. But the people who grew up on them will tell you with absolute certainty that nothing fried has ever tasted better. Number 17. Escargot. In a town where most people had never left the state, the supper club served snails, and it served them without irony. 6 escargots, nestled in the little dimpled metal dish, each one swimming in a pool of garlic butter and parsley so green and fragrant it perfumed the whole table. You pulled them out with a tiny 2-pronged fork, and honestly, the snail was just a vehicle. The whole reason to order escargot was that garlic parsley butter, which you sopped up afterward with bread until the dish was clean enough to put back in the cupboard. It was the most European thing on the menu, the dish that let a farmer in a string tie feel cosmopolitan for one course. The snails came canned from France. The butter was made fresh, and the combination cost the kitchen almost nothing while charging a premium that nobody minded paying. Escargot was theater. It was a small act of sophistication in a place that did not put on airs. And then the casual chains came, and nobody under 60 has ordered a snail since. Number 16. Lobster Newburg. When a supper club wanted to show off, it reached for lobster Newburg. Chunks of lobster meat folded into a sauce of cream, butter, egg yolks, sherry, and a whisper of cayenne, cooked gently so the sauce never broke, then spooned over toast points or into a pastry shell. It was rich enough to stop a heart and elegant enough to silence a table. For the inland Midwest, lobster was the ultimate splurge, a creature from a coast most of these families had never seen. And the Newburg preparation stretched a little expensive meat a very long way with that luscious sherried cream. It was the dish you ordered for an anniversary, a graduation, a deal closed. Lobster Newburg dates back to Delmonico's in New York in the 1870s, but it found its longest life in the supper clubs of the heartland, where it lingered on menus into the 1980s before the casual chains decided cream sauces were too old-fashioned to sell. Number 15. Shrimp de jonge. Here is a dish that Chicago invented and the Midwest fell in love with. Whole shrimp baked in a casserole under a thick crust of garlic, butter, sherry, and seasoned breadcrumbs until the top turned golden and the whole thing bubbled at the edges. It came out of the oven smelling like a garlic dream, and you broke through that crunchy crust to find the shrimp underneath, plump and soaked in sherried butter. Shrimp de jonge was born in a Chicago hotel run by the de Jonge brothers around the turn of the century, and from there, it spread to every white tablecloth supper club within 500 miles. It was the dish that proved a landlocked supper club could do seafood with as much swagger as any coastal restaurant. The breadcrumb crust did double duty, stretching a half-dozen shrimp into a full, satisfying plate. It cost the kitchen far less than it looked like it should, and that gap between cost and impression was the entire economic genius of the supper club. Today, outside of a few old Chicago institutions, almost nobody makes it. Number 14. Chicken a la king. Tender pieces of chicken, mushrooms, pimentos, and peas, all bound in a velvety cream sauce sharpened with sherry, ladled over toast, rice, or inside a crisp puff pastry shell. Chicken a la king was the supper club's answer to comfort and elegance at the same time. The pimentos gave it little flecks of red, the mushrooms gave it depth, and the cream sauce tied a few scraps of chicken into a dish that felt generous and refined. This was the meal a supper club served at the ladies' luncheon, at the Rotary dinner, at the wedding reception in the back room. It was so popular that kitchens made it by the gallon, in steam table pans, and it never lost its richness sitting under a lamp. A few cents of chicken, a splash of sherry, and a whole lot of cream produced a dish that people remembered for decades. It is the kind of food the casual chains decided was boring, and so it disappeared, replaced by grilled chicken on a bed of nothing. Number 13. Veal Oscar. This was the supper club flexing every muscle it had on a single plate. A veal cutlet, pounded thin and pan-fried, topped with crab meat, blanketed in a rich béarnaise sauce, and crowned with a few spears of asparagus. 4 luxuries stacked on top of each other, every one of them expensive, all arriving on one plate for a price that made it the most aspirational thing on the menu. Veal Oscar was named for a Swedish king, and it carried itself like royalty. The veal was buttery and mild, the crab was sweet, the béarnaise was tangy and warm, and the asparagus cut through all that richness with something green and clean. You did not order Veal Oscar on an ordinary night. You ordered it when you had something to prove or something to celebrate. And then veal fell out of favor. Béarnaise was deemed too fussy, and a dish that once defined sophistication slipped quietly off the American table. Here is what the casual chains understood and what they used to win. The supper club meal took 3 hours. You drank in the bar, you grazed the relish tray, you ordered, you waited, you ate slow, you closed the place down. That was the entire point, and it was also the weakness. America in the 1980s wanted speed. It wanted to be seated, served, and back in the car in 50 minutes. And the chains built their whole model around that clock. They were not better. They were faster, cheaper, and everywhere, sprouting up at every highway exit while the family-owned supper club sat alone out by the lake, run by people who were getting old and had no one to take it over. The chains did not beat the supper club on food. They beat it on the clock and the calendar. Number 12. Steak Diane. Some dishes were cooked in the kitchen. Steak Diane was cooked at your table, on a rolling cart, by a waiter who had practiced the show 1,000 times. A thin beef tenderloin, seared fast in a pan over a burner right beside your booth, then doused with brandy and set alight in a column of blue flame that lit up the dim dining room and made everyone turn to look. Into the pan went mustard, Worcestershire, cream, and a swirl of butter, and the waiter spooned that sauce over the steak with the confidence of a magician. It was dinner and a performance at the same time. The flambé was the entire appeal, a moment of fire and drama that turned an ordinary cut of beef into the most exciting thing in the room. Tableside cooking required a trained staff, expensive carts, and time. All the things the casual chains refused to spend money on. So they killed it. A whole generation of Americans has never once watched their dinner catch fire 3 feet from their face, and they have no idea what they missed. Number 11. Beef Wellington. A whole beef tenderloin coated in a paste of mushrooms and shallots, wrapped in pâté, then sealed inside a golden shell of puff pastry and baked until the crust shattered and the beef inside stayed pink and tender. Beef Wellington was the most ambitious thing a supper club kitchen ever attempted. A dish so complex and so impressive that ordering it was practically a dare. When the waiter sliced into it tableside and the pastry crackled to reveal that ribbon of pink beef wrapped in dark mushroom, the whole table fell silent. It was named for the Duke of Wellington. It took the better part of a day to prepare, and it represented everything the supper club aspired to be: generous, theatrical, and just a little bit grand. Wellington was the special occasion dish, the one a couple ordered to split on their 25th anniversary. It was far too labor-intensive to survive the chain era, where every dish had to be assembled by a teenager in under 4 minutes. The skill it required walked out the door with the last generation of supper club chefs. Number 10. The twice-baked potato. Every supper club entree came with a potato, and the twice-baked potato was the crown of them all. A russet baked until soft, then split open. The inside scooped out and whipped with butter, sour cream, cheese, and chives, then piled back into the shell and run under the broiler until the top browned and crisped. It came to the table looking like more effort than it was, and that was the magic. A potato cost a nickel. Whipped up with a little dairy and baked twice, it became a side dish people specifically remembered. Some clubs did au gratin instead, thin potato slices layered in cream and cheese and baked until the whole pan turned bubbling and golden at the edges. Either way, the potato was never an afterthought. It was a statement. The casual chains gave you a foil-wrapped baked potato with a packet of margarine and a tub of imitation sour cream and called it the same thing. It was not the same thing. The twice-baked potato was love, scooped and rebaked by hand. Number 9, the Friday fish fry. This was not a meal so much as a ritual, and in the upper Midwest it was practically a law. Every Friday the supper club fried fish, and the whole town turned out for it. Lake perch, walleye, bluegill, or cod, dipped in beer batter or breadcrumbs and fried golden, piled high on a plate with a scoop of coleslaw, a pile of fries or German potato salad, a slice of rye bread, and a little cup of tartar sauce. The tradition came from the old Catholic practice of abstaining from meat on Fridays, and in places like Wisconsin and Minnesota, it became something everyone observed, Catholic or not. The fish was fresh from the lakes that the supper club sat beside, and the batter was a secret each cook guarded. For a few dollars, you got a mountain of fish and a community, because Friday night the place was packed wall to wall with families you had known your whole life. The fish fry is one of the few supper club traditions that survives, but in most of America it has gone entirely, a casualty of the chains that fry their fish from a frozen box. Number 8, baked Alaska. When the lights in the dining room dimmed even further and a glow appeared at the kitchen door, the whole room knew someone had ordered the baked Alaska, a dome of ice cream set on a layer of cake, covered completely in a thick shell of meringue, and then impossibly baked in a hot oven, or torched at the table so the meringue browned and crisped, while the ice cream inside stayed frozen solid. Sometimes it arrived flaming, doused in warm liqueur, and lit on fire as the waiter carried it through the dark room to applause. It was a dessert that defied physics, hot and cold at the same time, and it was worth every bit of effort because of the gasp it pulled from the table. The chains replaced it with a chocolate cake from a freezer truck and a single sad candle. The fire, the drama, the impossible science of it all vanished. Number 7, Cherry's Jubilee, another dessert cooked in flames at your table. Dark, sweet cherries, warmed in their syrup in a pan over a burner, then flooded with brandy or kirsch and set alight, the blue flame dancing over the surface while the waiter swirled the pan. Once the fire died down, that hot, boozy cherry sauce was spooned over a scoop of vanilla ice cream, where it melted little rivers into the cold cream. The contrast was everything. The warm, spiced cherries against the icy vanilla, the smell of caramelized sugar and brandy hanging over the table. Cherries. Jubilee was supposedly created for one of Queen Victoria's jubilees, and it carried that air of occasion right into the supper club booth. It was the dessert you ordered when you wanted the night to end on a high note, with a little fire and a little ceremony. The casual chains decided customers could not be trusted around open flames and that tableside service cost too much, so they snuffed it out. A whole art of cooking dessert in front of the people eating it simply disappeared. Number 6, Bananas Foster. Born at Brennan's in New Orleans in 1951 and carried up the river to the supper clubs of the Midwest, Bananas Foster was the warm, decadent cousin of Cherry's Jubilee. Sliced bananas, cooked in a bubbling pan of butter, brown sugar, and cinnamon until they softened and caramelized, then splashed with rum and banana liqueur and set ablaze tableside in a sheet of flame that drew every eye in the room. The whole thing was poured, still flickering, over vanilla ice cream, and the cold cream collapsed into the hot caramel sauce. The smell alone, butterscotch and rum and warm banana, was enough to make the next table order one too. Bananas. Foster still clings to life in a few old-line restaurants, but as a regular Saturday night offering at a small-town supper club, it is almost entirely a thing of the past. Number 5. The Grasshopper. Here is where dessert and drink became the same thing. The Grasshopper was a milkshake for adults, a blend of green crème de menthe, white crème de cacao, and a generous scoop of vanilla ice cream, whipped until thick and pale green and poured into a chilled glass. It tasted like a melted mint chocolate chip, cool and creamy and sweet, with just enough booze to make the room a little softer. In Wisconsin supper clubs, the Grasshopper was not ordered after dinner. It was dinner's grand finale, sipped slow in the booth while the kids fell asleep against the vinyl. Some clubs made theirs so thick you needed a spoon. It was the kind of indulgence that felt sophisticated and silly at the same time, a grown-up treat in a state that takes its ice cream drinks more seriously than anywhere on earth. The chains gave America the frozen margarita and the cookie skillet and quietly let the ice cream cocktail die. But in the supper club, that green glass sweating on the table was the perfect way to end a night. Number 4. The Pink Squirrel. If the Grasshopper was green, the Pink Squirrel was its rosy twin, and it has the better origin story. It was invented at Bryant's Cocktail Lounge in Milwaukee, a blend of crème de noyau, which gives it that almond flavor and pale pink color, white crème de cacao, and vanilla ice cream, all whipped together into a frozen dessert you drank through a straw. It tasted like cherry almond candy melted into a milkshake, sweet and nutty and impossibly smooth. Ordering a Pink Squirrel was a small declaration that the meal was over and the relaxing had begun. It was the drink for people who did not really drink, sweet enough to be a treat, boozy enough to count. Wisconsin held on to the Pink Squirrel long after the rest of the country forgot it ever existed, because Wisconsin understood something the chains never did, that a meal should end with a little joy, not a check slapped on the table. The Pink Squirrel is the taste of a supper club Saturday, and almost nowhere else in America can you even find one anymore. Number 3. The Relish Tray. It was not a dish you ordered. It arrived whether you wanted it or not the moment you sat down, and it was the soul of the entire supper club experience. A lazy Susan or a divided tray, spinning on the table, loaded with cold, crisp vegetables and small indulgences. Carrot sticks, celery, radishes, green onions, pickled beets, marinated mushrooms, a crock of liver pate or Braunschweiger spread, a tub of sharp cheese spread, a pile of crackers, sometimes a few pickled herring for the brave. You grazed it while you waited, spinning the tray, spreading the pate on a cracker, salting a radish, and it cost the kitchen almost nothing while it did the most important job in the building. It made you feel taken care of before you spent $1. It said, sit, relax, the night is long, eat something while we get to your table. No casual chain ever brought you a relish tray because no casual chain wanted you to slow down. They wanted you fed and gone. The relish tray was generosity made of vegetables. And when it disappeared, something gentle in American dining disappeared with it. Number 2. The Brandy Old-Fashioned. Before you ate a single bite, before the relish tray even stopped spinning, You ordered one of these because in the supper club, the meal began with brandy, not whiskey brandy, because Wisconsin fell in love with California brandy at the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago and never let go, and to this day drinks more of it than any state in the country. The bartender muddled a sugar cube with bitters and an orange slice and a cherry, added a generous pour of Corbel, and topped it with sweet soda if you wanted it sweet, sour if you wanted it sour, or 7-Up if you were somewhere in between. It came in a short, heavy glass, garnished with fruit, and it was the official handshake of the supper club. You sipped it in the bar for an hour before they called your table. It set the pace of the entire evening, slow and warm and unhurried. The casual chains poured wine by the glass and called it a night. But the brandy old-fashioned was a ritual, a sweet amber signal that you had arrived somewhere that intended to take its time with you. Number 1. Prime rib. At the top of every supper club menu, in the largest letters, sat the dish the whole institution was built around. A standing rib roast rubbed with salt and pepper and roasted low and slow for hours until the outside was crusted and the inside ran rosy pink from edge to edge. It was carved to order, and the waiter asked you how big a cut you wanted. The queen cut, the king cut, the end cut for the people who liked it well done. It came to the table on a warm plate swimming in its own au jus, with a little dish of horseradish so sharp it made your eyes water, and a twice-baked potato beside it. The first bite was buttery and beefy and tender enough to cut with a fork. Prime rib was the reason you got in the car on a Saturday night and drove out past the streetlights. It was the centerpiece of the whole long, slow, generous evening. The casual chains could never sell it, because real prime rib takes hours and skill and a roast that costs real money, so they let it fade. But for one golden generation, that pink, glistening slab of beef under a ladle of au jus was the taste of a Saturday night in America, and nothing the chains put on a laminated menu has ever come close. So here is my challenge. Find a supper club that is still standing, the kind out by a lake with a gravel lot and a neon sign, and go on a Saturday night. Order the brandy old-fashioned, graze the relish tray, get the prime rib, and watch them carve it. These were not just meals. They were a whole way of spending an evening that we traded for speed and forgot we ever had.